I guess what I suggest everybody do is just Google mapping inequality, which is our project. It's not just mine, but a project I've done with a number of colleagues, great colleagues. What it is it's a site that lets people explore the infamous redlining maps that were produced in the 1930s by the federal government. And you don't have to look at many of them, or like you pick any of them, and what you're going to find is they're really explicitly racist documents that were very focused on maintaining segregation and cataloging this is their word, the infiltration of African Americans and immigrants into neighborhoods. And the larger point we hope people take away from this is that this is obviously these are examples of this is an archive of racism, but it's also a kind of powerful example and an important example of structural racism, because this is not just like individual people evidencing their kind of racist perspective. It is the federal government that is endorsing racism, segregation, Jim Crow as best practice for the real estate industry. And these grades, so they ended up grading neighborhoods on a scale of A to D. Neighborhoods were deemed to be really safe investments. These were, the real estate language is pretty pronounced too. They were deemed to be hot spots, where there was like a hot market, and that people who were making their money through providing mortgages could make safe, profitable investments in. On the other side were D neighborhoods, which they deemed to be hazardous, and said that good conservative lenders wouldn't loan money into those areas. And every African American neighborhood, not all redline neighborhoods were African American, but every African American neighborhood was redlined with like these very singular odd exceptions. But it's over 99% of the African American neighborhoods that are graded or that were given grades were given D redlined grades. So it has a profound effect, because it meant that the government helped middle class white families, native born white families, to get mortgages, to become homeowners, to get all of the money and wealth that accrued as those houses appreciated enormously during the course of the 20th century, and made it impossible, or really much more difficult, for African Americans and to a lesser extent immigrants from doing the same, which has this kind of ripple snowball effect in terms of wealth creation, which people like Charles and other researchers have been showing have a lot of correlations with health disparities and with environmental disparities today. So it's an enormously important subject, and we're just kind of providing some of the resources for people, whether they be interested in environmental justice or interested in health inequities, or just interested in being like an anti-racist realtor, can use this hopefully to inform the practice and the way they do their work.
Interesting, because there was like a recent study around real estate practices, and where people of color and poor people ended up living in more polluted neighborhoods, right? And so the one thing that was said was that in the article is that the National Association for Realtors said, they strongly support the Fair Housing Act, but then the study actually said, it was really interesting. It says that, that means that, everybody should examine whether or not the Fair Housing Act needs to be changed in order to address issues like pollution, and in fact needs to be updated or tweaked or something in terms of addressing climate kind of issues, right? And stuff like that. So that's interesting, because that's something that the National Association of Realtors could really come out for, in terms of pushing for, like more better, support studies to understand this, what is happening, as well as maybe public policies that create more affordable houses. You know, housing choice is so fundamental. You know, it's like it's
It's everything. It
yeah,
determines what you eat, whether you live in a food desert or not. It determines the
that's
education
right.
of your
That's right.
children. It's
You
everything.
know, the study that I think is one of the most influential studies in the environmental justice area is one that looked at the correlation between segregation indexes, you know, how segregated a neighborhood is, right? Neighborhoods are, and estimated cancer risks from ambient air toxics. So it found, I mean, it found like that the more segregation it was, you know, the higher the cancer risk, right? Um, but it also found if you have, that's true for every population group, but also for the these are done by municipalities, for the municipality as a whole. So that means that if you have the whole, everybody, it's not just that some groups are, you know, more disadvantaged because of this, but everybody is, you know, worse off. So so that's a, it's Rachel Morello Frost. She's a really well-known, well-respected researcher from University of California, Berkeley. She did that study, and that'd be really interesting. I mean, it really looks at residential segregation directly.
And other work that's been done by other researchers has just really brought home how, like, if you take these redlining maps and you look at kind of anything else that has to do with inequality, it could be COVID-19, it could be other health outcomes, it could be environmental pollutants, it could be access to supermarkets and or conversely food deserts. It could be educational quality. Anything is gonna, that's a component of inequality, something we measure for inequality is in most cases going to match up with these and correlate with these redlined areas.